On one day of the seventh month of 1981, the postman in Carson City, Nevada, delivered some letters and bills to Mr. Chris Coulson's house. When he arrived at Mr. Coulson's doorstep, the courier noticed something strange. It was found that last week's mail remained the same in the mailbox untouched. Then the courier started smelling a strange smell, so he had doubts. Especially since Mr. Coulson is 83 years old and lives alone in that house. The courier knocked on the door, and when it didn't open for him, he immediately reported it to the police, who came and took off the door and broke into the house. So they found Mr. Coulson's body decomposing and lying on the floor of the hall. A report of Mr. Coulson's death as a result of a sudden heart attack was then recorded and the time of death was determined, which was 8 days before the discovery of the body. Because of the lack of known relatives of Mr. Coulson, his body was cremated and the ownership of his house was made available to the municipality of Nevada. After the announcement of Mr. Coulson's death in the official gazette and the absence of potential relatives of Mr. Coulson or creditors demanding money from him, the court decided to auction off Mr. Coulson's house 6 months after the date of the announcement of the death in the official gazette. And after the expiration of the period, the house was sold to Mr. Mark Hanley's family. Mr. Hanley bought the house after he was sure of the good biography of the late Chris Coulson. After his neighbors praised him and described him as a good man who can't hurt a creature, Chris Coulson, who bought that house in 1944 and restored it on his own throughout the years following his purchase and then lived in it alone without getting married, preferring solitude and tranquility until the hour of his death came. As the houses of that area are known to be secluded and surrounded by a large garden or green spaces. Days passed and Mr. Hanley settled in the house with his family consisting of his wife, 11-year-old son and 14-year-old daughter. But a few weeks after they occupied the house, family members have increased that feeling that makes them think that something in this house is not so good. In the beginning, the feeling of distress prevailed over the family members. After that, the annoying nightmares started to wake up their beds night after night. Then that strange smell that keeps tickling their noses and they don't know its exact source. As if it is everywhere. Hanley thought that was normal for a family living in a new house, and that they would get used to it. But things did not improve for the rest of the family members, but rather started to get worse, especially after the frequent turning off and turning on of the lights during the night for no apparent reason. And also hearing the sounds of humming permeating the walls in some clear nights, which provoked horror and panic among girls. So there is a lot of complaining about that strange house, and one day Mr. Hanley decided to take off one of the wooden panels from the kitchen floor for the purpose of passing the new hot water pipe. But as soon as he did that, a suffocating smell came out and then his daughter screamed with horror. Below, I saw the place of the deposed board, what looked like the bony feet of a human being wrapped in nylon material. Hanley decided to take off more boards to make sure of it. And after he did that, he was horrified to see a number of skeletons of nylon-wrapped bodies tied to adhesive tape. Hanley's entire family was deeply shocked to discover that they had spent their last weeks living and sleeping on top of what looked like a cemetery. And that the explanation for the strange phenomena that were happening to them is the presence of these unknown bodies under the floor of their kitchen. But the matter didn't stop there. There is a tantrum. Hanley Sr. kicked one of the walls of the house. And if the wall is shattered and another body wrapped in nylon falls from it. Hanley's madness erupted, so he grabbed his axe and started destroying the walls of the house, discovering that it was full and stuffed with more human bodies. Then he deliberately went to the floor of the house like the hall and the rest of the rooms and started to smash them and take off their boards, and each time more and more of those bodies appeared as if they would never end up appearing. Henley's shocked wife called the police, who were also shocked by what they saw. And on that day Hanley's family was evacuated to a hotel. While the police closed his house and considered it a major crime scene. The FBI, in cooperation with the Nevada Police Department, also thoroughly searched the horrific house to arrive at the correct number of bodies buried in the house. The police found more bodies in the basement floor and in the outer garden soil. And in the end 46 bodies extracted from that scary house and its garden were counted. The press for its part has gone crazy with this news until the old man's house became the talk of young and old in America. Perhaps the most impressive of what has been stated in the meantime is Mr. Hanley's claim to have seen the ghost of a 13 or 14-year-old boy in that house who was standing at the top of the stairs and looking sadly down. Police, for their part, have unveiled their solution to one of the most horrific serial murders in the country, those related to the serial killer nicknamed Nevada's Stranglehold, whose period of activity in the state was between 1944 and 1951. The serial killer was famous for strangling his victims and then kidnapping their bodies and hiding them in an unknown place. A number of witnesses had confirmed their vision of the serial killer practicing his crimes of strangling victims after he singled them out in remote places isolated from human crowds, and then transported the body by a closed truck. But he suddenly stopped his crimes after 1951 without the police realizing why. But today, and after 30 years, the police announce that this killer is called Christoph Coulson, who died 7 months ago, and that the police have discovered this through skeletons that have been proven to belong to the missing victims of Nevada's Stranglehold. This is because there is a lot of evidence related to these bodies, including material ones such as the presence of identities and wallets that are still intact for some of them. Confirms that they are among the kidnapped at the time of the crimes. But during the current investigation, the police discovered a diary hidden inside one of the smokehouse's bricks from the inside. The notebook belonged to the former owner of the house, Mr. Chris Coulson. Coulson stated in his memoirs that after buying that house, he had his first murder in 1944 when, during a tantrum, he strangled the realtor who had implicated him in buying this dilapidated house. Coulson, without the events of the first crime in all its details, he stated that he was guided to hide the body inside the damaged floor and to repair it later. And in this way he gets rid of the body once and for all, and from here came the idea of burying people he doesn't like inside the floor and walls of his house while he is restoring it. After that, Coulson started mentioning the locations and dates of his subsequent crimes without mentioning the details. But he remembers how he used to select his victims. He wrote that he was driving his truck very far from his home. Then he goes down and walks in the different towns he visits, putting his hands in the pockets of his coat. And when he sees a person, male or female, behaving in a way that he doesn't like, he watches him until he singles him out and then makes him a target for his two strong fists. Coulson stated that he is doing this in order to rid the country of annoying parasites who do not respect the feelings of others and do not give them weight. Where Coulson sees them like mosquitoes that must be disposed of. But Coulson himself later admits that he had overkilled. He was punished with murder. Even those who saw him spitting in public, shouting at a child, or doing anything that personally disturbed Coulson. Coulson also stated that he decided to become cautious after police increased their crackdown to arrest Nevada's stranglehold. He used 2 different trucks when transporting the body. Where the first truck is used at the crime scene, then somewhere inside a secret barn away from the main roads, he replaces the truck with another one in order to stay away from suspicions. Coulson then recalls the details of his last murder, which happened in 1951. He said it caused him so much pain that he decided to stop killing forever, and that he will live the rest of his life trying to atone for his last crime. He mentioned that on one night of the 6th month of that year, Coulson saw someone knocking on the door of one of the closed shops. That person's continued pumpkin on the closed shop bothered Coulson. So he stretched out his hands and eliminated him from behind. This person continued to hit the closed store, which disturbed Coulson. So he stretched out his hands and eliminated him from behind. And when he pulled him into the light, Coulson was surprised that he was nothing but a 13-year-old boy. Coulson then said that he had regretted a lot for that heinous act, especially after he saw on TV the mother of that boy whose heart was stolen on her little one. She explains how her son, Billy Mercer, toiled at work all day, and that he begged her to let him buy ice cream before the shops closed. But she didn't allow him until night came. At that time, I allowed him to get out. He rushed that night but never came back after. Because he has become a prey to the murderous serial killer. Coulson kept remembering that he often saw the ghost of Billy in all corners of the house. And even when he goes out to commit a crime, he sees that child in front of him. So Coulson retreats and doesn't do what he will do. To quit the crime once and for all. That's where Chris Coulson's memoirs ended. But the strange thing about it that Coulson mentioned in it that he committed 47 crimes. The number of bodies exhumed from the house was only 46. As for the police, they are quite sure that the missing body is the body of the boy Billy Mercer, the victim of the latest crime. This is because all the bodies have been matched to their ownership reported missing 30 years ago. Except for Mercer's body. It must have a smaller structure than the rest of the structures. And this is what the police did not find despite the thorough search. So where do you see that Killane has buried that boy? Billy's missing body remained a mysterious secret that inflamed journalists' pens for many days. Especially after returning to the tape of the interview with Mr. Henley in which he mentioned seeing the ghost of a 13-year-old boy standing at the top of the stairs immediately after discovering the bodies. Because Mr. Henley's statement came before the police found the memoirs in which Killane mentioned seeing the ghost in his home. Mark Henley's claim thus matched memoirs written nearly 30 years ago. This is what has fueled public opinion in the country about the fact that ghosts exist in our world. The next day the police came out with a new statement. They revealed that they had found nylon remains and used adhesive tape near a set of structures they had previously found in the garden grounds. The head of the investigation pointed out that they did not give importance to the issue in the past. But now they're sure that those remains of nylon pieces and adhesive tape belong to Billy Mercer's body. They assume that Coulson, after regretting the boy's murder and watching his ghost all over the house, Coulson exhumed Mercer's body and buried him elsewhere away from home. And that the police found among those remains on a piece of cloth that probably belonged to Mercer. So the police will resort to using trained police dogs to smell the cloth and go out to search for the alternative grave site. And that's what it was. The boy's structure was found buried under a stone bridge on a small stream in the area, 10 miles from Coulson's house. And so on. The case has been solved. All the bodies were later buried in a systematic manner in the cemeteries designated for this purpose. As for the scary house, Mr. Henley sold it to a wealthy horror movie lover for a large sum, who in turn renovated the house and turned it into a small hotel that attracts horror lovers and invites them to spend a terrifying night in that haunted house. Maybe they have the vision of the ghost of Ice Cream Boy, and indeed the house has become one of the most famous houses of horror in the country. And crowded with guests looking for adventure and experiencing the dose of horror that this house provides. The owner of the hotel even hired teams of ghost hunters and experts of supernatural phenomena with all their complex devices and techniques to prove the presence of the alleged ghost of the child in his hotel. These teams have come up with positive results about the extraordinary energies surrounding this majestic hotel. In addition to the repetition of guests' views of abnormal visions and situations that occur during the night, some visitors have even stated that they see the ghost of the boy who is suffocated by an eye. But after 7 years have passed, specifically in the second month of 1989, Mark Hanley came out with a fiery statement while he was on his bed in a hospital in Nevada. He admitted that he had found Coulson's diary before the police arrived. So he deliberately read it, especially what is related to Coulson's vision of the ghost of the child. He then returned the diary where he found them hidden among the chimney bricks and then claimed his famous claim about seeing the ghost of the child at the top of the stairs. Henley also admitted that he did it to bring him fame and money. And this is what he achieved when he sold the house for an imaginary amount. Henley made those confessions after it was confirmed that he had a serious illness that will not keep him in life for long. The police, for their part, have played another role in this case. Where I started searching the hotel that was built on the ruins of Coulson's house, they discovered that the owner of the hotel had manipulated the interior design of the hotel by planting wires and tubes hidden inside the walls, in order to create the effects, sounds and atmosphere of horror that guests expect. And after that scandal, the owner of the hotel admitted that he had bribed teams to detect supernatural phenomena to announce that his hotel is haunted. And also it turned out that all the people who claimed to see the ghost of the child, they were bought by the owner of the hotel. The owner of the hotel justified doing so by saying that the house had lost its terrifying energy after exhuming the bodies from it and burying them in its own cemeteries. All that is left for him is to take advantage of the name of the house and its special fame to see the ghost of the child in it. Thus the biggest deception in the history of the country was revealed. A lie that was derived from the innocence of a child who died treacherously and without guilt. Psychologists have explained that Chris Coulson's claim in his famous memoirs about seeing a child's ghost always in his home and sometimes outside, is due to compulsive fantasies that originate in the torment of conscience. But in fact, there is nothing outside called ghosts. But what do you think? Do you really believe in ghosts?